We got 3 more segments left with investigative reporter Jon Rappoport. And I tend to agree with him that there's been major hype in the past dealing with H1N1 5 years ago that was a total hoax, and that came out in mainstream news later, and dealing with other medical things. But Ebola has reportedly killed over 1,000 people now since we just talked a few days ago back on Thursday. It has reportedly spread all over the place, and we know it's very communicable. So why are they taking people for the first time into Germany, into the U.S., into mainline medical facilities? That is a big deal. Is it for plausible deniability when they release something later, to create fear, to push a vaccine a year or 2 down the road? Obama signed an executive order to allow detention of Americans with any type of respiratory illness. Unprecedented. That's up on Infowars.com. While the borders are wide open and illegals that are sick, I've had senior Border Patrol agents on the last week, including the head of the Border Patrol Retiree Union, confirming it's on purpose and organized crime, and people that have TB, you name it, are allowed in. I mean, that's crazy town. So what is the plan with the borders? Ebola, this age of crisis. I keep saying more and more crises. Dollar devaluation, staged war in Ukraine, turning Al-Qaeda loose in the Middle East to kill Christians everywhere, the Gaza situation, all these crises popping up at once. What does investigative journalist and a guy that's done investigative journalism for some of the biggest networks out there in the past, syndicated columnist, NoMoreFakeNews.com, what does Jon Rappoport think in the big picture? Before we get into Ebola and the rest of it, we've already talked about that for an hour and 15 minutes. John, I've thrown out the gestalt here, or the big picture, that clearly things are going into high gear. Is it just meant to set the precedent where we'll put up with anything? Is it meant to put us into learned helplessness? Is it a Pavlovian event where they shock an animal enough it just curls up in the corner? Is this learned helplessness? Is this Stockholm Syndrome writ large? Or is this one part that, one part just criminal activity, and one part Nero burning Rome for fun and then committing suicide a year later? Because all he could do as dictator, who no one stopped, was kill himself, which a lot of crazies do. When they can't dominate others, they've already won, they just kill themselves. Is it Hitler turning east to attack Russia? Is it Napoleon turning east to attack Russia? Is it criminals always trying to get caught, finally trying to bring themselves down, taking bigger and bigger risk? Is it one part that? Have I properly, from your literal deep understanding, and I don't kiss my listeners or guests butts, but Paul Watson's real smart, Jon Rappoport's real smart, these are the type of people I listen to. What do you think's really going on, Jon Rappoport?
Well, Alex, I think the learned helplessness part is major. You know, you overwhelm people with a number of these crises all at once. I mean, that's classic PSYOP kind of work, where people feel like they're being driven from pillar to post. They can't concentrate and try to figure out what's going on in one area when something else pops up, and then a third, and then a fourth. It's all happening at the same time, and so they throw up their hands and they say, well, there's nothing I can do. There's nothing I can contribute. There's nowhere to go. So I just have to let the people in charge take care of it because it's just too overwhelming. I don't think there's any doubt about that in all of these staged crises happening at the same time. No question about that. And I agree with you also, it's moving into a higher gear. Absolutely. The rapidity with which these things are being splashed in everybody's faces is enormous. And then you've got the fact that no explanations are given for outrageous behavior that just drives people into a state of cognitive dissonance where they can't, even think anymore, such as, well, what happened at the border? Why all of a sudden this? All of this horrendous kind of oppression has been going on in Central America for a long time. So why all of a sudden do we have all these kids and people showing up at the border? Where did that come from? No answer, is supplied there except, kind of ridiculous generalities. And, why all of a sudden do we have, war in Asia and war and all this insanity going on in the Middle East? and the U.S. Government under Obama supporting terrorists and calling them by various different names,
Oh, yeah, total psyop. I mean, it's Al-Qaeda. They just changed the name. I mean, it's getting crazy.
So, that just drives people completely to distraction and then the business with the open borders and all these sick people coming in with, infections and diseases. And people are looking around at each other saying, do you understand what's going on here? I mean, am I missing something? And everybody is just, with a giant question mark over their head. They don't know what to think. That's part of the learned helplessness, too. So to me, that's just a major, major aspect of this.
Well, let me ask you this then. Is the bottom line, this is full spectrum dominance, siege level warfare by the globalists against humanity as a whole to bring in a global crisis so we finally accept global governance?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is the end game. That's the purpose for all of this. All of the sub-motives and objectives and whatever all feed in, as you and I have discussed a number of times, into that big picture, which is total global dominance by the globalists. That's what they want, so that people will just give in. Okay, so it's time for a new money system. All right, whatever you say, do whatever you want, because we just can't fight it anymore. That's what a lot of people think. And, of course, that's totally wrong. But when you have this kind of psyop assault on people's minds and consciousness, that's what you get from a lot of people. They just give up, they surrender, and then you can enact even more insane things than you did. I mean, it's like testing the limits of insanity. Okay, if we just open the borders and we let hundreds of thousands of people flood in, people that are sick, people that are dying, unaccompanied children, terrorists, gangs, this, that, and the other thing, and the people will go for that, and there won't be any massive rebellion in the streets.
Why not bring in live Ebola?
Exactly. Let's try that. And if that flies, okay, so maybe it's time now for Obama to unilaterally declare amnesty for all immigrants and to say that the whole idea of borders in the first place is ridiculous.
Stay there. Incredible. See, folks, I'm up here ranting and raving. Jon Rappoport in like 6 minutes just crystallized everything. I mean, you don't hear this anywhere else. And I'm not just saying that. You really don't. I mean, he just broke it all down.
This is Leanne McAdoo for InfoWarsLife.com. I'm here with Dr. Edward Group, master herbologist and chief formulator behind the InfoWars Life products. Dr. Group, what have you been hearing from women who've started taking Super Female Vitality?
We've heard the reviews and feedback from Super Male Vitality, from emails to even excited callers on the radio. Now, the answer for women is here. A new formulation specifically designed for the female body, Super Female Vitality, delivers 10 key herbs that work synergistically to revitalize the unique biology of women.
I'm so glad that you guys made this for women. When he brought me home the bottle of Super Female, I had tons of energy, tons of motivation, a lot of drive. My husband thinks I've been in a better mood. Our relationship, all I can say is it's a lot better now.
I've just started taking Super Female Vitality from InfoWarsLife.com. Supplies are limited, so secure yours today at InfoWarsLife.com, InfoWarsStore.com, or dial 1-888-253-3139.
Up on Infowars.com, Obama brings Ebola into America after signing executive order to detain sick Americans. 2 + 2 = 4, folks, not 5, like Common Core says. Senator Schumer calls for laws on private drone use. Yeah, we knew that was coming. Demonized drones, but then only let the government have them. Ebola outbreak. Western drug firms have not tried to find vaccines because virus only affects Africans. That's an actual quote out of the UK government. You cannot make this stuff up. You cannot make this stuff up. It affects everybody equally, folks, on a racial basis. Stuff like HIV is racially discriminatory, if you could use that term, towards Africans. Ebola cover-op in a hypnotized world. Again, covert op in a hypnotized world. That's Jon Rappoport's article. That's just some of the stories up on the main website. But, John, what I know here is this. This is clearly by design. These are decisions they're making to bring live Ebola inside host humans that can spread it into hospitals that aren't even contained for this. There's all sorts of federal laws. I looked them up. The headline should be, Obama violates federal law, shipping Ebola victims to hospital. I mean, it's on record that stuff like that's got to be in a level 4 facility. They've got those all over the place. They've got them in Atlanta. Why aren't they there? So regardless, they're doing something on purpose. We know it's fear-mongering. We know, I mean, there's a lot of things, but you just mentioned it all earlier, but there's even more to it. Where do you see all this going, and what do you think the next big crisis they may pull, and what are all these crises supposed to lead up to?
Okay, I see a few things. One is, and you mentioned this earlier, they're rushing to sell, billions of dollars worth of a new vaccine that they're now going to test on humans. All of a sudden, all these years they've been saying, well, we got no vaccine for Ebola, can't get it. All of a sudden, oh yeah, we can do this. In fact, we'll do it right away. Watch out for that one, baby, because who knows what's going to be in that one, and who knows how toxic that is going to be to people who are then going to fall ill, and then they'll be diagnosed that, no, it wasn't a vaccine, these people actually have Ebola. So to bring people into the U.S. who have been diagnosed with Ebola is definitely a step in that direction. Oh, now we must have a vaccine. We've got to get it there. I'm also looking, because now in West Africa, these areas in Sierra Leone and Liberia and the Republic of Guinea have now been sealed off. So I'm waiting for the next shoe to drop, which is a curtailing of goods on boats and giant ships and everything shipped out of Liberia especially, but other places too. No, we can't let any of this stuff out. So now you have total collapse of, commercial trade. You've got all kinds of businesses going under because they run on credit, and now they can't ship goods and they can't pay their bills. And now you've got all this explosion at the border, and I'm expecting to see some stories in the press pretty soon about the North American Union or some version of that, where the people are going to be saying out of Washington, why do we have these borders in the first place? They're absolutely unnecessary, costing us billions of dollars. Let's just have Mexico, Canada, the U.S. as one giant, nation or whatever territory, and that'll solve the whole problem, prosperity for all, just the opposite of the truth, whatever. So those are a few of the things that I'm seeing coming up on the horizon. And all of this is leading to incorporating the U.S. as part of, the globalist world, to say the United States cannot be an isolated nation, cannot handle their own affairs, is deeply in debt, money crisis, jobs crisis, disease crisis, everything. And somehow the way to solve this, which is totally illogical and insane, but, nevertheless, because we live in an interdependent world, that's how it'll all be solved, through the global village. Everybody will be one, et cetera, all that insanity. And that's what we're moving toward here, and that's the new day, the new money system. That's globalism in a nutshell. That's where all of this is going. The whole thing with the borders is completely about destroying the borders and saying they're artificial, they don't exist, there's no reason to pay any attention to them, and that's the globalist message, which is basically the communist message. There is no such thing as private property. There's no such thing as sovereign nation. Unless
you're a globalist outside the sovereign nation. Again, that's key what you just said. They don't just get rid of the border. They get rid of the nation and then bring you under their international rule with all these secret boards and treaties, just like the Asia-Pacific trade agreement is secret for 3 years being negotiated. We go under true corporate global dictatorship, not of the corporation that's free market down the street from your house, but of these globalist mega banks who are anti-free market, anti-middle class, anti-prosperity, anti-human.
Exactly. And the crisis, to me, that's going to happen, it's already underway to some degree, because nothing is perfect, and people shouldn't think that the globalists have, the perfect plan for totally dominating the world. And that crisis is going to be, you've got all kinds of corporations out there, giant corporations, that need consumers to sell their products. And if they put the world under this globalist system and they expand the kind of poverty and desperation that we've been seeing over the last 10 years or so, they're going to run into one of their own crises, which is that some of those corporations are going to be screaming, we don't have enough consumers. The whole shooting match could go down completely because they've gone too far, too long, and they've made too many people too poor and too desperate to even participate in their controlled economy, at which point the ship just absolutely sinks.
And then global homeland security groups, other crisis management organizations run by the private banking intelligence agencies that have taken over our governments pose as the saviors and consolidate even more control and then launch the next phase of their anti-human operation.
You bet. Absolutely. Because now we have to combat chaos in the streets. Now we have to combat, rebellions cropping up.
And I'm going to be saying put the Army out here to stop the rioting because the Army will be heroes fighting a crisis the globalists helped create, but nevertheless fighting a real enemy. It's like our military fighting Al-Qaeda. No, they're really fighting real radical scum. So I'm not saying they aren't heroes or it isn't real. The problem is the globalists gave the weapons and the training to the crazies to begin with.
Absolutely. I mean, part of solving a crisis that was created by the globalists to begin with is that it has to be a real crisis. It can't just be in your mind. You really do have to feel threatened. There really does have to be enough violence and chaos so that people will say, help us, save us, bring in the heroes, do whatever you have to do. I mean, it works. Once you take it that far, it works. But the end game goes beyond that. The end game is now you have a lockdown planet. Now you have, global homeland security who is saying we're going to bring order out of chaos. And in the aftermath, yes, you folks are going to have far less freedoms than you did before, but you will have security. We will protect you, and we know that's what you want, right? And they're betting that the majority of people are going to say absolutely.
Well, there you have it with Jon Rappoport, the secrets of the New World Order, the secret of their psyop, the secret of what they want. Now, there's always been a lot of bad people in Texas as well. There are a lot of great people across this fine land. But I got to tell you, the good old-fashioned real Texas values that I grew up with, that's Americana. And that's what I want to see come back to this country. I guess you could call it chivalry. Kind of the end of the American Revolution, kind of settled here in Texas. And for all our bad angels, we had a lot more good ones, to use that analogy. Closing out here, the worldwide transmission with Jon Rappoport. John, quantify who the globalists are, what their deepest end game is, from all the thousands of people you've interviewed on your TV show and radio show and books you've written and the bestsellers and all the rest of it, really delving into the esoteric nature of these people. And then how do we beat them? Jon Rappoport.
Well, there's certainly the kind of banksters that you've been talking about for a long time, and I think increasingly so, because the money men who are manipulating money, creating the money, inflating, deflating, value is what they're doing at the drop of a hat. Financing ventures, pulling their money out, putting it in, roaming the world, because under the World Trade Organization, which is a key element of globalism today, corporate banksters and so on can move in and move out at will. And they're just, they want to own the world. They want to own life itself. And we don't have a lot of time, but we can certainly, indicate that
they want to play God. That's why any free will gets in the way of them. They're here to override humanity, turn us into robots.
Exactly. Destroys all of that idea of freedom. And so that's the solution has always been and continues to be freedom. The individual, starting with the individual. And the problem has been recently that there's a lot of people who pay lip service to that idea of freedom, but they don't back it up.
I agree, but what about the globalists? How do they not burn with a wish for liberty? How do they not want to empower others? How do they want to see others fall and be weak? And then, as you just said, how do the average yuppies and people just pay lip service and not take it personal that people are trying to enslave them?
Well, I think to explain the globalists, you've got to understand that those people, their rise to extreme wealth was not ever through the free market. They cheated, lied, stole, corrupted, murdered people to get
John
to the
D.
top.
Rockefeller said competition's a sin.
Exactly. So by the time they got to the top, you think they're going to turn around and talk about freedom?
No.
That's the horror to them. That's like Satan to them, is freedom. Because they did everything they could to destroy freedom on their way up. That's how they got to the top. So that really explains their psychology.
And they lost a lot of battles and are battle scarred, and they want to settle the score.
Exactly. They look at themselves as in a perpetual war with the human race, and freedom is their nemesis. That's the silver cross that, destroys them. They don't want to look at it. They don't want to think about it. They just want to eliminate it and make everybody into robots and androids. That's their whole plan. They think that's going to make them safe. Of course, it's not, because you can never kill freedom. But there's got to be, we're talking about the yuppies now who play lip service to this whole idea of freedom. They're just cowards. They sell out at the drop of a hat. But there's millions and millions and millions of people in America that do have some notion of what freedom means. And they have to deepen that notion to the point where they know what it is that they are going to do in order to preserve and protect it.
I agree, but plus the yuppies don't get, and I never knew this when I started out and was ignorant. I just knew I loved freedom and didn't want to be a slave. I'm still ignorant, but compared to what I was 18, 20 years ago, it's a different creature. But you become physically more successful by not selling out in this paradigm, especially towards the end when everybody else already sold out. They're selling out cheap. You're selling out to be a slave. That's no deal at all.
And you fail. I mean, a long time ago as a writer, I came face to face with this question. Well, I could sell out, and then I could write stuff that I thought would make me a lot of money. And then I thought to myself, yeah, but suppose I even try that, which I don't want to do, and I fail. That's going to be a double failure. So why not do exactly what I want to do, come hell or high water, and let's go that way. And just as you say, I've watched people over the years who have sold out fall by the wayside, who thought, man, I've got this thing knocked. And these are people that I've known, and they say to me, man, you're heading for total disaster because you're doing exactly what you want to do. And my response has always been, well, let's see what happens 10 years from now. Let's see who's still around. And I've watched some of these people just absolutely burn up and blow away in the wind because they sold out. They became totally bankrupt spiritually, morally, and even physically bankrupt because it just never worked out. What really works out in the long run is you know what you actually believe in, you know what freedom is, and you act on it, and you don't stop.
Well, exactly. In fact, I've seen the psychological studies over and over again, but I knew this instinctively, why so many criminals in criminology try to sabotage themselves and why people that do really evil stuff are so unhappy and have such horrible lives. It's because even their subconscious brain isn't pure evil and wants to destroy them. It's like their own self doesn't like them. It's incredible.
Yeah, it is incredible. And I think you're right when it comes to the globalists. Deep down, they know that this is totally destructive, totally criminal, that they're responsible, and they're looking for some form of end to themselves, self-destruction, suicide. I mean, that is necessary to explain some of the things that they're doing because it can't be explained in any other way. That subconsciously, they're looking to destroy themselves. But unfortunately, if they succeed, they're going to take a lot of people along with them. That's why they got to be stopped.
I'm looking for a way for space colonization and my grandchildren to basically achieve immortality. I'm looking just to absolutely double down and invest in the future of humanity and to have goodwill towards all and to just crush parasites and criminals and scum and just stop being slobs and rediscover our primitive energy and to merge that with all the new developments that the best and brightest have brought us and to just build a wonderful world, John. And I guess they call that terrorist.
Yeah, I guess they do. What it really is freedom. And that's what, I got hooked on when I was 10 or 11 years old, was some of the great science fiction that talked about vast, far-flung, outposts of humanity on planets and so on and so forth. And what you would see in these different places is people who were free. They were cut loose from the centralized insanity and bureaucracy and control, and they just built and created extraordinary lives from themselves.
Sure, and Frank Herbert and Robert Heinlein and all of them said these were allegories of what was happening on Earth when they were alive.
Absolutely. Yeah, Heinlein especially was really critical of everything he was seeing develop, and a lot of his readers never really realized that, but he saw it coming. Man, I read stuff of his when I was 12 or 13 that was... And by the way, I hitchhiked through Amarillo in 1961 on Route 66 out of East St. Louis, and I got to Amarillo in the dawn. Guy dropped me off, and I saw a huge pasture with these cows standing in tall grass, so tall that you couldn't see their legs, and they looked like they were floating. And I thought, wow, what kind of world is this? Fantastic. Wide open, beautiful Amarillo in the morning.
We ought to call this segment, when we put it up on YouTube, Amarillo by Morning now. Wow.
Yeah.
What a powerful pro-human discussion. NoMoreFakeNews.com. I tell you, it's a pleasure knowing you, Jon Rappoport. And I want to get you to Austin. We ought to fly you here soon to sit down to an interview for another upcoming film. Thank you so much, John and crew. Great job. Listeners, we love you. We'll see you tomorrow. Visit Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. When you're on the site, you can also tune in 24 hours a day to my daily radio broadcast. There's also a free iPhone app to listen to the syndicated radio show when and where you want.